Hi, this is Group 8, and our topic is the economic and political liberalization that is taking place in Russia and China. I'd like to start off by first giving you a brief definition of the term economic globalization. It refers to fewer government regulations and restrictions in economies in exchange for greater participation of private and foreign entities, essentially creating an ideal and competitive free market. In most first world countries, in order to make them globally competitive, they pursued a path of economic liberalization. This would include partial or full privatization of government institutions and assets, a greater labor flexible market, lower tax rates for businesses, and less restrictions on both domestic and foreign investment. In developing countries, economic liberalization usually refers to opening up of their respective economies to foreign capitals and investments in order to jumpstart their economies and get them competitive with the developed market. First, we'll start off by giving a brief analysis of each country, starting with the history and the policy changes that it's enacted in order to become economically and politically liberalized. And then I'll explain how both of the countries are similar and different in terms of economic and political liberalization and tie them both together. I believe we'll first be starting off with Russia, with James Elrod.
All right, history of China. The continuation of the Chinese Civil War started in 1946 and ended in 1949 with a Communist Party victory. Mao Zedong took over leadership and began to implement a policy of rapid modernization. He favored the centralization of industries, whereas other party members did not. Mao went against the other half of the party and instituted his policies, which resulted in the collapse of the Chinese economy. And then Deng took over after Mao in 1976, and he brought in all the economic zones and everything else, which I'll discuss in a few minutes. In terms of political liberalization, China has remained relatively unchanged. An example of this is the Tiananmen Square Fair of 1989, when Chinese students held demonstrations demanding freedom of press and less government control of personal liberties. The Chinese government responded to these protests with force due to the fears of national attention because of the Russian Premier Mikhail Gorbachev visit to the region. Chinese troops inflicted massive casualties to the students in the square. Economics, like I said, Deng took over in 1976, and he brought in some economic zones, which privatized areas, and which offered growth. And with the growth, it allowed more jobs. Thousands of people actually started working. And now, as of August 2010, according to the New York Times, China became the second largest economy next to the United States. Russia.
All right, Russia's economy has changed from a centrally planned economy to a market-based economy. But by the end of World War II, Joseph Stalin was the leader, and his plan was to industrialize the entire country, which was at that point much of a farmer country. He created jobs through dam building, steel mills, and machine building. But due to political and economic isolation, these industries ended up failing. But in 1953, Stalin died, and the next 15 to 30 years brought on little to no political and economic reform. However, in 1987, Mikhail Gorbachev, the president of Russia, created new Western-style democratic ideologies, one of which restructured the economy, decentralizing it, and allowed citizens to create and run their own enterprises. Along with this economic policy, other more democratic style policies such as increasing public debates and allowing free elections, so to speak. But in 1991, the USSR fell, which brought on millions and millions of dollars of debt that Russia carried with them, because Russia called themselves the legal entity of the Soviet Union, which brought upon years and years of poverty, such as with the collapse of the Russian ruble.
All right, now that you have a better understanding of how Russia and China got to the points of where they are today, I'd like to give you a brief compare and contrast of both countries and tie everything together before the presentation's over. In terms of similarities, both countries have a history heavily based on communist principles and centrally planned economic systems. They both have adopted liberalized economic systems in order to compete in the global market and grow to the economic powers that they are today. In terms of differences, they're very different in political aspects. Whereas Russia was a communist government until the fall of the Soviet Union, they adopted a democratic form of government fairly recently, within the last 30 years. This rapid transition from the communist-based centrally planned system to the democratic free market-based system initially resulted in the collapse of their economy, but in the last 10 years they've been able to rebound to become a viable economic power with the 12th largest GDP in the world. China has suppressed any attempt of political ideas other than communism, and the example of Tiananmen Square. However, with the economic systems they've adopted in the economic zones and free trade zones, they've been able to open the market up to foreign investment and personal capital gains, which has worked out well for them. They have the second largest GDP in the world and are competing with us for the largest economy in the world current day. Overall, I hope this presentation was left you with a better understanding of how the two world's largest global economic powers have adopted liberalized economic systems and political policies in order to become the world superpowers that they are today in terms of economics and military. Thank you for your time, and I hope this presentation was educational.